Chapter 254, Rendover, 2. A terrorist attack took place at the lock during the Battle Royale games of the Inter-Academy tournament. 2 teleportation devices were found to be installed during the event. Investigators have linked this attack to the monolith. With the brave efforts of 2 young students, the portals were soon found and their activation was prevented. Unfortunately, in a last-ditch attempt, one of the perpetrators directly cracked the core installed in the teleportation device. A massive explosion followed suit, killing 260 people and injuring more than 80 in the process. Click! Turning off the TV, Emma threw the remote to the side. It's about time. Dressed in a black dress, Emma turned around. Let's go, Kevin. A weak and hoarse voice replied back. Kevin. Emma's lips tensed. Staring at Kevin, who was sitting on a white sofa dressed in black, Emma felt her heart tear apart. Ever since that day, Kevin had not been the same. He was skipping out on meals, and for the most part, he was always absent-minded. He had even stopped training, something that she had never seen him do throughout the whole year. His whole complexion was white, and his eyes were bloodshot. Glaring black circles appeared underneath his eyes. It's all my fault, he repeatedly muttered to himself. Emma did not understand why he was blaming himself for Ren's death. It wasn't something he could have controlled. But every time, Kevin would mumble those words. Blaming himself for Ren's death. Kevin. Emma called out. Emma. Give me a second. Kevin finally looked at Emma. He tried to smile cheerfully, but that made him look all the more pitiful. His lifeless eyes coupled with his glaring black circles caused Emma's heart to stir. Emma understood. Ren's death had truly hit him hard. We need to go. Attending is the least you can do for him. Today was the day of Ren's funeral. For obvious reasons, there was no corpse at the scene. Even then, no one questioned his death. Unless a miracle happened, there was just no way for Ren to survive. Emma, what do I do? Bringing Emma back to reality was Kevin's hoarse voice. Staring at her in the eyes, he weakly muttered. I don't know what to do. Had I not been so stupid, and just left? Why? Enough. Emma cut him off. Now is not the time for this. How long are you going to wail in self-pity? She was starting to get angry now. It was only natural for someone to be distraught upon the death of someone close. She too was sad. Although she wasn't particularly close to Ren, she did interact with him quite a lot in the past. And although Kevin and Ren were really close, the last thing Kevin could do was drown himself in self-pity. It wouldn't be something Ren would have wanted for him. Even though Emma didn't interact with Ren much, she could see how much he genuinely cared about Kevin. He would never want Kevin to blame himself for something like this. Lifting his head, Kevin weakly asked. Then what should I do? Get stronger. Emma's voice became firm. Get strong enough to prevent this from ever happening in the future and make those that have caused this pay. Be it the monolith or anyone that was involved. Whilst she spoke, Emma's eyes never left Kevin. She wanted him to understand that instead of beating himself up for what had happened, it was better for him to pick himself up and mature. Even if it took years for Kevin to recover from this, Emma wanted Kevin to use this incident as a reference point for his growth. She wanted him to grow stronger. Strong enough to prevent any of this from happening. I see, Kevin said after a brief moment of silence. Staring at Kevin, Emma was able to notice a subtle change in Kevin. Even though the sadness never disappeared, there was something else within that sadness. Resolution. The resolution to grow up and change. Seeing the change, Emma smiled beautifully. I'm glad you've picked yourself up. Emma extended her hand. Let's go, it's time we say
goodbye
to him. MHM. Taking her hand, Kevin stood up. Laying on her bed as her hair scattered all over her pillow, Amanda blankly stared at the ceiling of her room. A couple of days had passed since the incident, and unbeknownst to anyone, she had already started packing up her stuff. She was planning on leaving the academy soon. If before it was about the guild, this time, her reason for leaving the academy was different. It was because the academy reminded her of him. Everywhere she walked in the academy she would recall her conversations and memories with him. Although few, Amanda could vividly recall every single interaction she had with him. Even the small ones she had during class or around the campus. Despite having witnessed Ren's death right before her eyes, Amanda still couldn't quite grasp the situation. At this point, she was almost numb to the pain of having someone in her life disappear. Yes. Important. It was only after Amanda witnessed Ren's death that she had realized her feelings for him. She liked him. No. She loved him. She didn't know when, but at some point, she had started to long for him. Every day, a small part of her would look forward to the lectures and classes. The ones that had him in it. Just the casual things he would do, from cringing whenever the class attention was on him, or when he would randomly slap Kevin in the head to get a reaction out of him. All of those moments were deeply etched inside of Amanda's mind. At first, unfamiliar with this type of feeling, she couldn't quite grasp what she was feeling. But now she knew. And the realization was a painful one. One that once again shut her heart completely. Talk. Young miss, it's time. Disrupting Amanda was her attendant, Maxwell. The car is waiting for you downstairs. I'm coming. Weakly lifting her body up, Amanda responded. Staring at the neat black dress on her desk opposite to her, Amanda calmly walked up to it. It was time for another
goodbye.
Click. Dressed in black, Melissa closed the door behind her. Right when she was about to leave, her footsteps halted. Turning around, she looked towards the room that was next to hers. By now, the room was already empty. Everything that used to belong to Ren had already been taken by his parents a day prior. He's really gone, huh? Ever since meeting him, she had wished nothing but for him to die. But now that he had actually died, she felt lost. Perhaps because she had never talked to anyone else but him, but his death hit Melissa harder than she had expected. This caught her by surprise. For the past few days, she wasn't able to focus like before. She made a lot more mistakes than she would have normally have done.
Ha!
Closing her eyes slightly, Melissa exhaled before muttering. Just what is wrong with me? Turning around, she left. July 17th. 2 days after the tragic incident. It was a clear and sunny day in Ashton City. A day that completely contrasted the gloomy atmosphere that was revolving around the whole city. Inside a funeral home. Wah! Several people stood by the side of the room. A high-pitched wail echoed throughout the whole room as a young girl cried in front of a picture frame. Her eyes were red and snot fell from her nose. The scene was heartbreaking for anyone that was watching. Bwooter! It was Nola. Next to her, her mother and father tried their best to console her. But no matter how hard they tried, the crying wouldn't stop. It was only after someone used a sleeping spell on her that she stopped crying. By the side, Emma, Jean, Kevin, Melissa, Leo, Ram, and Donna all stood by the side. Staring at Ren's picture in the middle of the room. All people who Ren had influenced throughout his life. For some he was a best friend, for others he was something else. A business partner, a student, a friend, and the person that changed their life. Unknowingly, unbeknownst to Ren, for better or for worse, he had influenced the life of every single person present in the room. Listening to the funeral hymns, everyone lowered their head. For the next 30 minutes or so, no one talked. They all mourned for Ren's death. On this day, to the world, Ren Dover was officially dead. Asterisk.
Ha?
Staring at the blue sky, Kevin exhaled. With the funeral coming to an end, Kevin decided to go out to take a breath of fresh air. His mind was a mess. Despite what Emma had told him moments prior to the funeral, Kevin still couldn't quite pick himself up. He knew better than anyone else what had happened that day. Had he not been so fixed with the idea of saving those 8 people, and had directly left with Rin, none of this would have ever happened. This thought alone was eating him up from inside. "How are you holding up, Kevin? Miss Longburn?" Disrupting Kevin out of his thoughts, was a familiar voice. It was Donna. "What are you doing here?" "I was looking for you." "Me? Why would Donna look for me?" Did something happen? Kevin wondered to himself. "What do you need me for?" After a bit of thought, Donna responded. "I think I may know what happened with Ren." "What?" Shocked, Kevin's voice raised a few pitches. Putting her finger on her lips, Donna gestured for Kevin to lower his voice.
Shh.
"Lower your voice." Sorry." Realizing his mistake, Kevin apologized. "What do you have?" "Here, take a look at this." Extending her hand, a phone appeared on Donna's hand. Taking the phone, Kevin tilted his head to the side. "A phone? Give me a second." Pressing on the screen of the phone, a video appeared. "Take a look and tell me if you've also noticed something strange." "Sure." Pressing onto the play button, Kevin played the video. In the video, Kevin saw Ren. "Huh? What?" Most shockingly, he was quite close to the exit of the dome. In fact, he was practically almost out. Furthermore, from the looks of it, he had a lot of spare time to get out. Just what? Kevin abruptly stopped himself mid-sentence. That was because he saw it. Right before Ren set his foot outside of the dome, he suddenly disappeared. Replacing him was another youth. Kevin instantly recognized him. It was Aaron. What? Kevin's eyes opened widely. His mouth opened and closed repeatedly. He couldn't quite comprehend the situation. Did the video glitch or something? But if it glitched, how come Ren suddenly appeared in the distance? This didn't make sense. He then turned his attention back to Donna. "What's this?" "As you can see, I suspect that Ren deaths wasn't an accident. This." Once again, replaying the video, Kevin's blood started to boil. His breathing was slowly starting to get rough. A terrifying red hue slowly enveloped his body. "Aaron!" He venomously spat as he stared at the youth in the video. The more he watched the video, the more he was convinced that he had something to do with Ren's death. KHHH. Kevin. Unbothered by Kevin's pressure, standing by the side, Donna calmly spoke. "Kevin, don't act recklessly. We still don't have enough proof." "What do you mean we don't have any proof? This is as clear as day that he was the one." Kevin snapped. The video alone was enough evidence to prove Aaron's guilt. What else did they need? Staring at Kevin, Donna shook her head. "Unfortunately, it's not enough. This could very well be due to some sort of lag in the video. With the bomb about to explode and everyone fleeing, such a thing can happen. Furthermore, even if we know that Aaron is the one who did it, we don't know how he did it. With his backing, we also can't do too much. There were a lot of things that they needed to take into consideration when persecuting someone for a crime. In this day and age where all that mattered was a backing, with the pitiful amount of evidence they had, she couldn't see a way to get Aaron to face a trial. They could also of course take matters into their own hand, and try to kill Aaron directly, but that would be far too risky at the moment. Especially since he was now surrounded by bodyguards. Furthermore, if they found out it was them who killed Aaron, they would be in a lot of trouble. They couldn't be reckless about this. So are we just going to let him walk away like that? Are we going to completely ignore the fact that he killed Ren? Kevin raised his voice. Calm down, Kevy. How can you tell me to calm down? At this point, Kevin was practically shouting. The people around him were looking at him strangely, but he didn't care. Please listen to me, Kevin. Donna's eyes suddenly shone slightly. Kevin, who was about to scream again, stopped.
Ha?
Glaring at Donna, he took heavy breaths. A bitter smile appeared on Donna's face. Kevin, listen to me carefully. I'm definitely not letting Aaron go that easily, that's for sure. Donna's voice suddenly turned grave. The only problem is his backing. It's not something that we can go up against at the moment. So what should we do? Calming down a bit, Kevin softly asked. If they couldn't do anything now, what could they do? Was there really no other option? Staring at Kevin for a good minute, Donna closed her eyes. After a while, seemingly having made up her mind, she said. Join the Union. The Union? Wah. Please listen. Donna raised her hand and started explaining. If you want to truly make Aaron pay for his crimes, the best option would be for you to join the Union. With your talent, joining the Union shouldn't be a problem. Boo. Right as Kevin was about to say something, Donna once again cut him off. Let me finish. Only with an organization like the Union backing you can you enact your revenge. I've already talked to Monica, and she's willing to take you in right after you graduate. In the meantime, I'll help you grow to new heights and reach the top faster. Only when you're truly strong will you have enough power to take revenge for Ren. After taking a lot of factors into consideration, Donna came up with this solution. It was the best solution she could think of for Kevin at the moment. With the Union backing him, Kevin would be able to take his revenge without a problem. No one would dare to fight the Union. Kevin also understood this point, hence why he wasn't talking. Originally, Donna had tried to get Monica to do something, but her hands were tied. With the monolith terrorist attack that had just happened, the Union was in a complete state of alert. Almost all high-ranking members had been called back. Monica wasn't an expectation. She was so busy that she couldn't even attend Ren's funeral. So. Donna paused. Looking at Kevin straight in the eyes, she asked. Are you willing? Chapter 255, 876, 1. Pain. An immeasurable amount of pain engulfed my entire being. Slipping in and out of my consciousness, I felt my whole body burn. Every part of my body was engulfed by flames. At some point, I had lost track of time. Perhaps only minutes and seconds had passed, but for me, who was being burnt alive, such moments felt like an eternity. Before long, my body hit something hard and cold. But, being in the state I was in, my mind wasn't able to process what was happening around me. Instinctively, I just rolled around, trying to get rid of the flames engulfing me. Whilst slipping in and out of my consciousness, mustering every bit of my last strength, I swallowed something that I had put inside of my mouth beforehand. After that, despite all of my struggles to remain conscious, the world turned dark. Have you got anything? No, his facial features are too deformed. We can't get a proper read on his identity. What's going on? Who's talking? Awakening my somber mind was the sound of two people conversing. Though I tried to focus my mind on what they were saying, my mind was too muddle-headed to be able to comprehend anything. In fact, I found it hard to even think properly at the moment as everything felt dull and slow. What about after we heal him? That's possible, but it may take a couple of months for him to fully heal from these injuries. Almost half of his body is burnt. Perhaps if we use a high-grade potion, but... No, we definitely can't do that. It'll be a waste of money. We can just wait a couple of months. Anything else? For now, no. All we know is that he suddenly appeared in the hall with third-degree burns all over his body. I'm more surprised by the fact that he's still alive. Were there any items on him? No. Given the state he was in, there's a high chance that all the items he had got destroyed. From the looks of things, he must have survived some sort of explosion. He had no clothes on him when he appeared, and even the ring he had on him was badly damaged. I see, all right, you may leave. Understood, call me if you need anything, Professor. Minutes after the conversation ended, slowly opening my eyes, I was met with an unfamiliar white ceiling. A bright white light entered my vision, constricting my pupils slightly. Turning my head slightly, I found myself laying atop a cold metal table with wires attached all over my body. My body was numb. Oh, you've regained consciousness? A voice suddenly called out for me. Turning my head towards where the voice came from, an old man with a white lab coat appeared in front of me. With an amused smile, he studied me from top to bottom. How peculiar, he muttered. Under his observant eyes, I felt like a lab mouse. Insignificant. Who are you? Where am I? Ga, fu. The words that I wanted to speak did not come out. Instead, a zombie-like sound escaped from my lips. I wouldn't recommend you to speak right now, the old man said whilst a chuckle escaped from his lips. Where am I? Wog. Unable to comprehend what he was saying, I once again spoke. The same zombie-like sound escaped from my lips. TSK. What is it with you patients? Whenever I say something, you end up doing the exact opposite of what I tell you to do. The old man grumbled. Hey, you, bring me a mirror. Turning around, the old man yelled at one of the people in the room. Lifting my head slightly, I spotted a man wearing a white coat and a mask. Yes. From how polite he was being, he was most likely his assistant. The assistant quickly rushed towards one of the cabinets. Not long after, the attendant came back with a mirror. Taking the mirror, the old man walked up to me and smiled. Here, since you can't understand what I'm saying, I'll just show you the state that you're in. Once he turned the mirror around, my mind blanked. This can't be, is that me? Wag, guck. Reflected on the mirror was something that you would only see in a horror movie. With no hair on my head and burn marks all over my face. The clear white skin that I used to have was no longer there, as my face was now dyed red with pus flowing down my face. I looked horrendous. My mind, which was showing signs of recovering, was once again blank. I had many questions that I wanted to ask, but as if something was stuck in my throat, only hoarse sounds escaped from my mouth. Hgua, heifa. It was then that I slowly started to recall what had happened. Moments before the explosion happened, taking out the monolith ring that I had taken from Professor Thibault a couple of months back, I desperately channeled all of my mana into it. The goal was to teleport me to the monolith. Even though I knew it was a bad idea, this was the only way I could survive. Unfortunately, even though I successfully managed to teleport myself to the monolith, by the time I had managed to activate the ring, the flames had already engulfed me. From there it wasn't hard for me to understand what had happened. Having teleported directly in their headquarters, they must have directly taken me in. Don't worry. With current technology, recovering your face shouldn't be too hard, but, unfortunately for you, the higher-ups aren't willing to fork out the money needed to heal you quickly, so it might take a bit for you to recover your old appearance. Amused by my reaction, the old man laughed. Let me introduce myself real quick. Lowering his head slightly, the old man introduced himself. Nice to meet you, my name is Joseph Sharp and I'm the person in charge of you. Exclamation point. The moment the old man mentioned his name, my mind instantly cleared up. Cold sweat trickled down my back. Now, be a good boy and stay here. I'm going to check out my other subjects. I'll be seeing you in a bit. By then, you should have already have recovered your voice. Joseph Sharp. A notorious scientist that worked in the monolith. He, along with a couple of other famous scientists, was responsible for an extremely important project in the novel. The Monolith Super Soldiers Project. A project that involved the creation of elite soldiers that had no regard for life. Their sole purpose was to serve the monolith and accomplish any task they were given. They were soldiers that felt no emotions nor pain, almost like robots. Each soldier ranked from D and above, and although singularly weren't that strong, when they worked together, they were a force to be reckoned with. They were an elite unit that would appear 5 years from now and were responsible for many tragedies. They were so strong that they almost resulted in Kevin's death multiple times throughout the novel. You. Disrupting me out of my thoughts, Joseph called out to the same assistant from before. Yes. Give him a small dose of the serum. How much?
Ah.
I don't know. Given his state, I guess 2 milligrams would be enough for now, replied Joseph, squinting. Understood. Watching the assistant leave, Joseph smiled. My eyes soon interlocked with his. All right, I'll see you soon, test subject 876. Waving slightly, he joyfully whistled his way out of the room. Get me out of here. Goo-wah. Watching him leave, a desperate scream escaped from my mouth. It was almost instinctive. Even though I survived, I was now in a place worse than hell. The serum that Joseph was referring to was the liquid that they used to create the super soldiers. It was a liquid that eroded someone's mind, essentially turning them into brainless puppets. From there the brainwashing would start, turning them into unwavering monolith soldiers. Goo. Knowing this, mustering every bit of strength that I had in my body, I tried to get out of the binds that were locking me, but it was all to no avail. My mana had been blocked. Regardless of how much I struggled, the binds around me wouldn't budge. I was truly powerless. Suddenly, spit escaped from my mouth as the air was knocked out of me. Though I felt no pain, it didn't take me long to realize that someone had punched me. Shut up. The assistant glared at me. Be silent whilst I'm doing my job. Taking out a long syringe that had a long needle at the top, the assistant put a strange blue liquid inside of it. Squeezing the bottom of the syringe, a droplet of blue liquid fell down the body of the needle. Perfect. The assistant turned his attention back to me. Opening my eyes wide, I struggled even more fiercely than before. No. Anything but that.
Ugh.
Gwaha. Calm down, it's not going to hurt. Seemingly taking pleasure out of my suffering, the assistant slowly moved the syringe in my direction. Whilst he did that, with his other hand, he covered my mouth. Now, be a good boy and take the shot. Feeling a slight tap on my shoulder, I knew that the assistant had already put the syringe inside of my body. Squeak! The moment the assistant injected all of the liquid inside of my body, my mind numbed and I once again lost consciousness. No, help. GHH. Phew. Phew. Merrily whistling, Joseph's brows suddenly knit. Another failure. Staring at a patient from a large glass window, Joseph took out a notepad and crossed off a name. Test subject 037 failure, 300 mg seems to be too much for a single dose, Joseph muttered, scratching the back of his head. Yet another failure. Fuck. Despite spending over a decade in formulating the recipe for his serum, it was only half a year ago that he had managed to perfect it. Even then, Joseph still needed to do a lot of testing. He first needed to understand how much of the serum he needed to inject his patients with each day to erode their minds, then he also needed to check for any side effects. After doing a calculation, Joseph estimated that he still needed a year before finally being able to create his first supersolider. The only problem was the higher-ups. Having spent so much time on a simple formula, they were starting to doubt his research. He needed to present them with something fast. Joseph. Disrupting Joseph out of his thoughts, a voice suddenly called out for him. Turning around, Joseph's face darkened slightly. A trace of disgust flashed his eyes. Xavier, what is it? Standing before him was a young male. He had fair skin and green eyes. Outwardly he looked like a perfect gentleman, however, Joseph wasn't deceived. The man before him, Xavier Pierce, was one of the more sadistic and twisted men that Joseph had ever met. He was extremely notorious for his torture methods that could cause his victims to lose their sanity within minutes. He was not someone that Joseph wanted to associate himself with. And despite being higher ranked than Joseph in the hierarchy, Joseph couldn't bring himself to respect the man before him. How is test subject 876? Ignoring Joseph's obvious signs of hostility, Xavier asked. 876? He's awake, I've already asked someone to inject him with the serum. Good, good. Make sure you give him to us after you dull his mind. We've got a few questions to ask him. Understood. The number of people that were allowed to hold on to the monolith ring was extremely few. For someone that they did not know to have the monolith ring and suddenly show up, the higher-ups had a lot of questions to ask him. Joseph understood this. The main reason why the test subject was given to him was because they wanted to numb his brain for questioning. Only once he could no longer think for himself would he be able to spill out everything. All right, keep up the good work, Joseph. Patting Joseph in the shoulder, Xavier smirked. Just as he was about to leave, his footsteps halted. Before I leave. The higher-ups have told me to tell you something. What? They said that within 3 months if you don't produce anything, they'll cut your funding by half. What? Joseph's voice raised. He had clearly told them that he would get results in a year. Saying that they would only give him a month clearly meant that they had lost faith in him. You know that's impossible. You know that I can't do anything about this, Joseph. Laughing out loud, Xavier's eyes squinted. A black show rose from his teeth. I don't care about whether it's impossible or not. I'm merely telling you something that the higher-ups have told me to say, so make sure you don't mess up. Is that clear? KHH, understood. Under Xavier's threat, Joseph secretly ground his teeth and nodded his head. Damn it. He cursed inside of his mind as he looked at Xavier straight in the eyes. Perfect. I'll see you around. Smiling brightly, Xavier turned around and left. Staring at Xavier's back for a moment, Joseph took out his phone and failed a number. Before long, someone picked up. Professor? Increase the frequency at which we inject the patients with the serum from once a day to 3 times a day. Chapter 256, 876, 2. Opening a large metal door, was a tall and muscular guard. Wearing a gray uniform, the guard stood beside me. Test subject 876, this is where you will be staying. Grabbing me by the shoulder, the guard shoved me into a small 20 by 20 room. KHH. Falling face first on the ground, a dull sound escaped from my lips. My mind was a mess at the moment. I could barely formulate any thoughts. After every couple of thoughts, I'd forget everything that I was thinking about. Multiple different illusions flashed before my eyes. No matter how many times I blinked or closed my eyes, the illusions would never stop. It was never ending. This was what the serum did. It fed the brain with different kinds of illusions and vision, and in the process, it would slowly damage the neurons of the brain. You will receive food twice a day alongside your shot. In a week's time, if you're not dead, the professor will call you up. The guard's cold voice echoed across the room. Pooey. Why the fuck do I have to deal with this?
Shh.
*T. Glaring at me, the guard suddenly spat on the ground. Turning around, he smashed the door behind him. Ads by Pub Future. Clank. Once he left, silence enveloped the room.
Ha. Ha.
Mustering every last bit of strength in my body, moving forward, I leaned against a wall. Just that much movement caused me to be at a loss for breath. Turning my head slightly, I looked at the room I was in. Though the room was small, it had a small bed by the side, coupled with a sink and bathroom. A large metal door stood in the middle of the room, and at the bottom was a small compartment where I presumed the food would be pushed in. Looking around, I knew that there was no way out for me. Fortunately, there didn't seem to be a camera monitoring me. Perhaps it was because I wasn't particularly important, but this worked in my favor. At least for now. KHHH. A groan suddenly escaped from my lips. With the effects of the painkillers wearing out, every part of my body started to ache. The pain wasn't unbearable though, so it wasn't the worst. Although most of my mana was sealed, not all of it was sealed. The reasoning behind this was my injuries. Unless mana circulated inside of my body, my injuries wouldn't heal as quickly. And given that they wanted for me to heal, they decided to only seal my mana up to rank. This was enough. Mustering every last bit of mana inside of my body, I muttered. Monarchas, indifference. Talk 2. 876, it's time for your meal. A voice suddenly called out. Unfortunately, the voice was met with no response. Clank. Fucking answer me when I'm talking to you. The door flung open, and the same guard from before entered the room. Staring at patient 876, the guard raised his brow. So you've already gone insane, the guard muttered. Only 6 hours had passed since he had last seen him, and test subject 876 seemed to have already given up on life. Leaning against the side of the wall, 876 was dully looking at the ceiling. Even after putting a tray filled with food in front of him, he seemed to be completely unresponsive. Let's get this over with. Taking out a long syringe, the guard shook his head. Bending down, the guard tightly grabbed 876 by the arm, completely not caring about the fact that it was burnt. No reaction? I guess the effects of the serum are pretty strong. Uncapping the syringe, the guard pricked 876 in the shoulder and injected him with the serum. Squeak. KHH. A light groan escaped from 876's mouth. All right, we're done with the injection. Eat up your food. Finished injecting 876, the guard stood up. Lowering his head, and looking at the tray of food on the floor, the guard once again bent down and grabbed the food with his hands. Eat up. Grabbing 876 by the cheeks, he forcefully shoved food down his mouth. Even then, as he shoved food down his throat, 876 showed no reaction. Fucking eat. Annoyed by 876's reactions, or to be more precise, lack of reactions, the guard kicked the food tray away. The food spilled everywhere. Blamp. When I tell you to eat the food, eat the food. The guard suddenly threatened. By the time I come back, you better have finished all of the food, or else. Crack. 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 Cracking his fingers, the guard sadistically smiled. Ho, ho, if not, we're going to be having a lot of fun. The guard laughed out loud. Being a low-level guard, the guard had a lot of pent-up stress built up. Seeing how responsive 876 was, he thought of using him as a way to relieve himself of the stress he had built up. Since he was one of the many patients, he doubted they would care if anything happened to him. Furthermore, looking at the state he was in, he was sure that no one would notice if he suddenly go injured. What fun days. Buzz. Disrupting the guard out of his thoughts was a small buzzing sound coming from his wrist. Turning his wrist slightly, the guard cursed.
Shh.
*T, guess it's time for me to leave. Taking one last look at 876, he stepped on some of the food and made his way out of the room. I'll see you in a bit, 876. Clank. Smiling in satisfaction, the guard turned around and left the room. Once the door closed, silence enveloped the room. In the midst of the silence, slowly lifting his head, 876 coldly looked at the metal door opposite to him. I'm hungry. Having taken care of subject 876, the guard, who went by the name Mark, rubbed his stomach. It's a little bit early, but since I'm done, I might as well go eat. Licking his teeth, Mark turned his wrist slightly, looking at the time, 1850, he decided to head to the canteen to eat. After turning a couple of corridors, Mark arrived at the canteen. Because it was still early, the canteen was still quite empty. One fried chicken with some rice, please. Walking up towards the counter, Mark ordered something quick. Within a couple of minutes, a hot dish was presented before him. Taking the tray, Mark turned around and looked around the canteen. He was looking for anyone he knew. Soon his eyes lit up. Alvaro. He called out. Suddenly being called, a rather skinny man wearing the same uniform as Mark, turned around. Spotting Mark, he quickly swallowed his food and waved slightly. Oh, Mark. Putting his fork down, he smiled. Haven't seen you in a while, how are you doing? I'm all right. Putting his tray on the table, Mark sat down. As he sat down, he let out a long exhausted sigh. Something up? No, it's just that I have been put on babysitting watch. Mixing the rice with the chicken, Mark let out another depressed sigh. He was exhausted. Babysitting watch?
Yeah.
You know that crazy professor? Alvaro's brows knit. After a bit of thought, he carefully said. Crazy professor, you mean Joseph? Mark nodded his head.
Yeah.
Him. I now have to take care of a couple of his subjects. Ah. At Mark's words, Alvaro had a look of understanding. Within the monolith, everyone knew just how tough working under Joseph was. Especially taking care of his crazy patients. They were all insane, and difficult to deal with. What made it even harder for the guards was the fact that they couldn't use too much force on them. They were precious subjects after all. A trace of pity flashed Alvaro's eyes as he looked at Mark. Must be tough. Tell me about it. Most of them are completely insane. If not for the fact that I'm getting forced to do this, I'd never take this crappy job. Mark suddenly recalled something. Oh, right. I got a new patient today. New patient? Looking at how happy you are, the patient must be a good one? Out of all the patients I got, he's probably the best. Mark responded after a bit of thought. The best? Alvaro tilted his head.
Yeah.
His whole body is burned and he can't even talk. He's the easiest one to take care of. All he had to do was give him food and a shot. That easy. Unlike the other patients where he had to restrain, 876 was different. He was very docile. It was understandable though, given how weak subject he was, it'd be hard for him to struggle. For him to be this weak. Alvaro wondered, how badly burned is he? Oh, you'd be surprised. The first time I saw him, I was shocked. Half of his body is pretty much burned to a crisp. It's crazy. I don't even know how he's still alive. Describing subject 870's features, Mark couldn't help but shiver slightly. The extent of his injuries was very severe. It was no wonder that by the time he saw him, 876 had pretty much already turned insane. If he was put through the same thing as 876, he too would have gone insane. Why don't they just heal him? I mean, if they give him a simple potion, he'd be healed in no time. Listening to Mark's descriptions, Alvaro's brows knit. Since he was treated as a test subject, it would only be natural for them to be in optimal condition. If they were completely injured, they'd be useless. In response to Alvaro's point, Mark waved his spoon slightly. Tut. 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 No can do. According to the instructions, we're not allowed to give him nor any other patients any potions. Why? Wouldn't his injuries heal faster? I mean, even low-leveled ones would help speed up the process. No, that's strictly forbidden. According to what I've heard, if a patient that was undergoing treatment takes a potion, the effects of the serum they are injected with would be negated. Negated?
Yeah.
Taking a spoonful of his rice, Mark took a few bites before continuing. I don't knmhmg how much, according to the professor, only once the brain is damaged to the point of no repair can we give them potions. If not, everything would not work. I don't really get it, but sure. Nodding his head, Alvaro scratched the side of his neck. No longer interested in the topic, he decided to tell Mark about the latest gossip he had heard recently. Oh, by the way, have you heard about the...
Ha!
Cough, cough. 1 hour after the guard left, opening my eyes, I coughed up blood. The blood spilled all over the ground and food that had now become cold. Damn it. Staring at the blood on the ground, I weakly cursed. Although I had used Monarch's indifference to suppress the effects of the serum, it wasn't enough. Monarch indifference, from what I've tested after taking the first serum, could only slow down the effects of the serum. It wasn't a solution. It could not heal my damaged neurons. Only something like a potion could do that. Furthermore, because of my low mana capacity, I could use Monarch's indifference for at most an hour and a half. Thankfully, since I had only taken 2 serums so far, my brain was still not badly affected. However, if given time, I would without a doubt slowly lose all sense of reason. Therefore, whilst my brain was still not fully damaged, I had to come up with a proper plan to escape this place. Hoo. Taking a deep breath, and trying to suppress the pain that was engulfing my body, I started thinking of my circumstances. Alright, so far I'm stuck inside of the monolith and I'm currently being treated as a test subject for their project. This I understood as soon as I learned of Joseph's name. Since he was a major character, I knew about him and his project. Another good is that I'm currently disfigured. They don't know who I am. That is good. Had they known who I was, there was a high chance I'd be suffering even more. The cakey style was that tempting. In a way, getting burnt to a crisp was advantageous for me. Though not clear, I do remember them saying that my injuries would heal within 3 months, therefore, during that time I need to find a way to hide my identity. Realistically speaking, escaping within 3 months was almost impossible. At least not in my current state. Furthermore, I had no clue about the layout of the place. Fortunately, I wasn't completely helpless. Closing my eyes, I grabbed the food that was on the ground and stuffed my mouth. Even though it had now turned into mush and was covered in blood, I forcefully ate the food. This was a must. If I wanted to escape this place, eating the food was something I had to do. GKHHHH. A groan escaped from my mouth. Saliva spilled on the floor. Despite my stomach's attempts at throwing the food back out, I persisted and continuously ate the food. 2 more days. Hafch, JFH. I muttered whilst taking another bite of the food. Unfortunately for me, I still couldn't speak properly. Thus, only weird noises came out of my mouth. Even so, I persistently shoved food down the throat. At most 2 more days till I can turn this around. Chapter 257, 876, 3. Bam! KHHH. Take your food and eat it. Throwing the tray filled with food on the floor, Mark looked at subject 876 with disgust. Exactly 2 days had passed since he started to be in charge of subject 876, and although he always ate his food, he never showed any reactions to his abuse and beatings. This annoyed Mark quite a bit. There was simply no fun in abusing someone that showed no reaction. Even though this was supposed to be something to treat his stress, it was starting to annoy him more than actually helping him. TSK, how boring. Kicking, subject 876 on the foot, Mark decided to call it quits for today. Stepping out of the room, he smashed the door behind him. Clank. Asterisk. An hour passed since then. Hoo. Opening my eyes, I exhaled. At this point, the effects of Monarch's indifference had worn off and my mana was completely depleted. Holding on to the wall, I weakly stood up. Making my way towards the toilet, I sat down. With my whole body shaking, I bit my tongue and patiently waited for my body to do its business. Please let this be the one. I repeatedly muttered inside of my head. Plop. Eventually, a splashing sound reached my ears. My eyes lit up as a result of the sound. KHHH. Gritting my teeth, standing up slightly, I reached my hand downwards. Towards the bottom of the toilet. This was the 3rd time that I had done this. The previous 3 trials had all ended up in failure. Feeling a slightly mushy feeling in my hand, my stomach churned in disgust. Even so, I was not discouraged. Moving my hand around the toilet, I tried to feel anything hard. After searching for a minute, I finally felt something hard. My eyes lit up. Splash. Removing my hand from the toilet, a black bracelet appeared in my hands. Finally. Staring at the bracelet in my hands, I was almost unable to hold back my emotions. But, I couldn't help it. The light had finally shone in the dark tunnel that I could see no end of. I could now hope. I could now hope for a tomorrow in this hellish place. KHHH. Biting my lowering lip, tears had started to gather in the corner of my eyes. Right when the explosion started, I knew that there was a high chance I would get caught by the monolith. Desperate, whilst channeling mana inside of the monolith ring, I put my bracelet inside of my mouth and swallowed. This was my last hope. Thankfully it paid off. Splash! Walking towards the sink, I turned the tap on and washed the bracelet. After thoroughly washing the bracelet, waiting 10 minutes, and channeling the last bit of mana in me, I instantly took out 2 lower-graded potions from my watch. Gulp! Gulp! Uncapping them, I quickly downed them. Instantly, my mind, which was slowing down with each passing day, cleared up. My injuries also showed visible signs of improvement. Hello? Opening my mouth, I tried to say something. Though groggy, my voice finally came out. Biting my lower lip, the edges of my lips curved upwards slightly. I can finally speak. It was only after I spent 3 days like this that I realized that I had taken too many things for granted in my life. I had taken my voice for granted. Only after losing it for the past 3 days did I realize how important it was for me. Hoo. Taking a deep breath, I tried to calm my erratic emotions. Now was not the time for me to get emotional. I had other priorities to take care of. 5 hours. That was how much time I had at my disposal. At the 6-hour mark, the guard would come back with the food. Thinking of the guard, my teeth clenched. When I get out of here, I'll definitely make sure to kill him first. For what he put me through these past few days, I was definitely going to make him pay. Just the thought of him caused my blood to boil. But of course, that wasn't anywhere near the rage I felt for someone else. Aaron. Krrrr, krrrr. The sound of my teeth grinding together echoed across the room. Just the thought of him caused my eyes to turn red. Everything that I was going through was because of him. If not for him, none of this would have happened. If I ever get out of this place, I swear on my life, that I'll kill you. This was a promise I was intending to keep.
Ha.
Taking deep breaths, I forcefully calmed down my rage. I needed to keep my feelings bottled up for now. My priority, for now, was escaping. Revenge or any other thoughts were secondary. Weakly lifting my body and walking up towards the bed, I took out an energy bar from my bracelet and quickly devoured it. Because I had to focus on keeping my mind sane right after each dose, my food always ended up being cold. Furthermore, because of my injuries, the food was some sort of paste. It tasted terrible. Wow. Tapping on my bracelet, a small transparent glass container appeared in my hand. Inside of it was a dark green liquid. Mother's kiss. An extremely potent poison that upon ingestion could even cause rank creatures to die. It was something that I had found back in Amora. Hoo. Staring at the liquid in my hand, a long exhale escaped from my lips. What I was about to do next was going to be very gruesome. Wow. Once again tapping on my bracelet, a small dagger appeared in my hand. There was another feature of the mother kiss poison. It could be used to scar someone's face. To the point where only an incredibly expensive potion could heal scars. Mother's kiss was only truly dangerous upon ingestion. If not ingested, it would seep into the skin, scarring it completely. That's right. I was about to scar my face to the point where only an incredibly expensive potion or lotion could heal me. After having spent the last 3 days thinking about how to get out of this place, I realized that 3 months wasn't enough time for me. If I wanted to get out of this place, I need to make thorough preparations. For that I needed time. I estimated that within 2 months my face would have healed enough. Enough for them to finally recognize me. I couldn't allow that to happen. Therefore, Taking out a couple of painkillers from my pocket, I directly shoved them in my mouth. Cool. Patiently waiting for 10 minutes, and feeling the effects of the painkillers kick in, with shaking hands, I brought the knife closer to my face. Kuwua. A muffled scream escaped from my lips. Despite my attempts at being quiet, a scream couldn't help but escape from my mouth. I wanna die, I wanna die, I wanna die. Scarring my face with the knife, I repeated those words inside of my mind. The pain was unbearable. It felt as though I had millions of needles puncturing my face at the same time. The pain was even worse than when I was being burnt alive. The reason I was doing this whilst my face was still burnt was because no one would notice anything if I did it now. By the time my face healed up, it would be covered in scars. Drip. Drip. Blood seeped down from my lips as I bit them as hard as I could. Many times I almost passed out, but thinking about my family and my friends, I persevered. If this was the price I needed to pay to get out of this place and reunited with the ones I was close with, then so be it. I was prepared to do anything to get out of this place. Kuwua. For the next couple of hours or so, pained muffled screams resounded across the room. Regardless of how much pain I felt, I continued to persevere. Since then a week had passed. Apart from the usual routine of shots and abuse, nothing in particular happened. Fortunately, I now had my bracelet with me. It was filled with potions. With it, I didn't need to worry about my mind getting eroded. Unfortunately, the number of potions inside of my bracelet were limited. This once again reminded me that I had a limited amount of time to get out of this place. If by the time I used up all of my potions, I wasn't able to escape, I was practically doomed. It was as simple as that. Furthermore, because I would always swallow my bracelet back each time I used it, I had to wait 2 to 3 days for it to travel through my body. Given that there weren't any places to hide the bracelet, it was the only thing I could do. If by chance they found out that I had the bracelet with me, they would not only find out my identity, they would also get rid of my last hope at surviving this place. There was no way I was going to let that happen. Especially not after what I had done to myself a week ago. Clank. Disrupting me out of my thoughts was the sound of the door smashing open. 876, the professor is calling for you. The guard shouted as he entered the room. Hurry up and get ready, I was ordered to escort you there. Without saying anything and staring at the guard who had suddenly showed up in the room, I weakly stood up. Hurry up. Grabbing the side of my shirt, the guard shoved me forward. When the professor is calling for you, 876, you need to be there as fast as possible. Now follow me. The guard then turned right. Silently following from behind him, I tried to memorize everything. From the layout of the place, to the corridors we were walking on. Not one single detail was missed. If I wanted to get out of this place, every little detail was crucial. All right, we're here. Arriving before a familiar room, the guard stopped right at the door. To talk. He then knocked the door. Clank. Before long the door opened and a familiar face showed up. It was the assistant that I met during the first day here. Oh, it's you. Looking at me, he enthusiastically said. Come in. He then turned around and walked towards one of the cabinets. Heeding his orders, I slowly walked into the room. Just as my foot stepped past the door that led to the room, closing my eyes I muttered inside of my head. Monarch's Indifference. Chapter 258, 876, 4. Excellent! Joyously shouted Joseph as he stared at a small monitor before him. Extending from the monitor were multiple wires that attached themselves towards an individual. Subject 876. Who would have thought that patient that I had put the least hopes on would end up being the one that I have the most hope for? Joseph was truly delighted. Out of all the promising patients he had, 876 seemed to be the one displaying the most obvious signs of success. At the moment, subject 876 was going through a virtual simulation. Inside of the virtual simulation, the 876 was put under multiple different trials. The trials, although different, were all things that would cause any sane man to feel fluctuations in their emotions. From killing civilians to committing terrorist acts, or dying in multiple different ways. At the moment, both the MRI machine and Holter monitor were currently showing no unusual fluctuations. This meant that subject 876 was currently in the exact state Joseph was trying to achieve. A state where the user held no emotions. This was great news for Joseph. Especially since he had been pressed for time recently. With the higher-ups getting impatient, he knew that he needed to get results. He had finally got something. Beep. Beep. Who? Startling Joseph out of his thoughts was a rhythmical beeping sound coming from the Holter monitor. What's going on? Rushing towards patient 876, Joseph looked at the small Holter monitor. The fluctuations were no longer constant but were now extremely erratic. Beep. Beep. With each passing second, the fluctuations became more and more erratic. Stop the simulation. Joseph turned around and shouted. Yes. Heeding his command, his assistant arrived before patient 876 and pressed on the side of the headset he was wearing. Slowly the helmet turned off. Beep. 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 Upon turning off the headset, the beeping sounds coming from the Holter monitor calmed down. Damn, Joseph cursed slightly. How long was he inside of the simulation for? Reporting. About 13 minutes and 45 seconds. The assistant promptly replied. 13 minutes and 45 seconds. Joseph murmured to himself. After a while, he eventually shrugged his shoulders. Oh, well. 876 has only been here for a week. This result is understandable. Even though 876 had only lasted for a little bit, Joseph wasn't disheartened. Given that 876 had only been with him for about a week and was already showing signs of being the one most compatible with the serum, Joseph knew that it was best not to rush things. Ha! Staring at 876, who was breathing heavily on the table, Joseph rubbed his chin slightly as he pondered to himself. I guess it wouldn't hurt to invest a little more in him. If he could nurture 876 properly, who'd care about the little money he'd lose off of investing in him? Heck, by then he would be so rich in funds that he would only consider such a minuscule amount of money as spare change. Convincing himself that this was the right choice, Joseph looked at his assistant. You. Yes. The attendant's back straightened. Pointing at 876 who was laying on the table, Joseph fatly said. Speed up his treatment. Speed up his treatment? The assistant replied in a flustered manner. For the treatment to be sped up, without using potions, it would be with modern technology. However, it was extremely expensive. The news of the office getting their budget cut in a few months had already reached his ears. Simply put, it was a waster of money. Sir, in my opinion that is a bit too high. Shut up, and do as you're told. Cutting him off, Joseph shouted in annoyance. Treat him well, he's going to be one that's going to save our project. 876 was his hope. Nothing could happen to him. Don't forget to give him his shots. We can't be forgetting his shots. After taking the shots and taking a couple of more tests, the guard that was in charge of me escorted me towards somewhere I had never been before. Clank. TSK, I don't know what you did, but don't think you're getting rid of me. Arriving in front of a room and opening the door, I was thrown inside of the room. Mentally exhausted, I fell face first on the floor and stayed there. My mind was too exhausted to properly formulate any thoughts. I'll be back in 6 hours for your meal. Throwing me a look of disgust, the guard turned around and smashed the door behind him. Clank. Silence enveloped the room. This continued for 30 minutes before I finally decided to stand up. My mind had sobered up enough for me to think properly. Once I stood up, blinking a couple of times, I realized that I was in a different room from before. To my surprise, it was much bigger and more luxurious than my previous room. Although it wasn't anything fancy, it had a lot more things than my previous room. A wardrobe, a desk, a bed, toilet, and a most surprising of them all, a bathtub. Yes. A bathtub. Though surprised, I quickly lost interest. With the current state of my body, a bathtub wasn't something I could use. Thank God I didn't hide my bracelet. Recalling the fact that I never hid my bracelet and just swallowed it, I sighed in relief. Fortunately, I was cautious. Had I not done this, my bracelet would have been lost. Hoo. Sitting on the bed, I exhaled. Success. Shouting inside of my mind, I clenched my fists tightly. I have successfully gotten Joseph's attention. By using Monarch's indifference to erase my emotions, I reproduced something that closely resembled one of the soldiers that Joseph was aiming for. One that wouldn't react regardless of the situation presented before them. Inside of the virtual machine, the only reason I was able to do those horrifying acts was because of Monarch's indifference. If not for it, I would have never been able to do them. Another thing. During the virtual simulation, 13 minutes in, the effects of Monarch indifference ran out. I had done this on purpose. Since I couldn't cut off Monarch's indifference whenever I wanted, doing some calculations beforehand, I purposely consumed some of my mana before meeting the professor. I didn't want Joseph to think that I could last long in that emotionless state. I had done this so that in the future, as the tests progressed, he would see noticeable improvements in the time I could stay in that emotionless state. As long as I showed signs of improvements, he would invest more in me. This was my aim. The more important I was, the greater my treatment would be. This was a necessary step I needed to take for my future. Only when I was fully healed could I escape. Since then, another week passed. S44I. ZEE. Two mechanical arms hovered above 870 SIX's head. Strapped on a metal table, a red laser scanned his body from top to bottom. He was unable to move at all. Even then, he showed no signs of struggling. Dully staring at the ceiling, the laser beam continuously moved up and down. Shockingly, although slow, 870 SIX's injuries were showing signs of healing. Slowly but surely, his burnt skins showed signs of improving. How are the results? Everything seems to be all right, Professor. He may be able to recover within a month's time. A month's time, huh? Joseph scratched his nose. Any way we can speed up his recovery? Not unless we use a potion, and well, we can't really use those, so unfortunately we can't. Although technology had advanced to levels where they could pretty much treat most injuries, they weren't perfect. Unlike potions that could treat patients almost instantaneously, treatments like this took much more time. All right, have you given him the serum yet? Somewhat accepting the circumstances, Joseph switched the topic. Yes. How many grams? We've upped the dose from 2 milligrams to 10 milligrams as you've suggested. Oh. Let's test its effects. Click. Click. Walking up to 876 and removing the restraints off of him, Joseph helped him up. All right. Seizing him up, Joseph nodded his head in satisfaction. He then looked at him straight into the eyes. Noticing the indifference oozing off of him, Joseph smiled. From now on, your name will be 876. You're my first successful subject, and your purpose from now on is to faithfully serve the monolith and me. You are to never betray us nor have any other thoughts. From today onwards, you are the monolith's faithful dog. Is that clear? Joseph grinned from ear to ear. Now tell me, who are you? Who are you? He repeated. Not getting a response the first time, Joseph wasn't disheartened. It was only the second week of testing after all. Still, a little part of him hoped for 876 to answer him. After a couple of minutes had passed and still not getting an answer, Joseph shook his head. Well, I guess we can try next. 876. Joseph abruptly stopped speaking. Snapping his head right towards 876, he raised his voice. Repeat that. Repeat to me your identity. My name is 876. Once again opening his mouth, 876 stuttered. The reply was slow, but even then, the meaning of his words was easy to understand. He had acknowledged himself to be 876. Perfect. Joseph burst into a fit of maniacal laughter. It worked. My experiment worked. He had finally gotten one step closer to creating his first super soldier. This is great. With 876, I now don't have to worry about the funding. 876, come with me. I need to present you to the higher-ups. Walking back and forth, Joseph bit his nails. Quickly redirecting his attention back to 876 and staring at his body, he stopped himself before shaking his head. No, I can't rush things yet. He's still not ready. Joseph forcefully tried to suppress his emotions. He was too high on success. Since he had been given 3 months, he might as well make full use of that time and develop 876 even more. Added with the fact that they wanted to question him, it was best to thoroughly brainwash him before going to the higher-ups. With their tempers, he wouldn't know what they'd do. Thus, he turned towards his assistant whose name he still did not know. You. Professor? What about the other subjects? How are they doing? Is there anyone else that is promising? Other subjects. Let me check. Taking out a tablet, the assistant scrolled through some files. Not before long, he answered. Out of the 1743 subjects we are testing, only 47 show a similar reaction to 876. Although not as prominent, they are the best next thing after him. From the data that we have analyzed. 47? That little? Joseph cut in the middle. That's only like a 3% success rate. This number was a lot lower than he had expected. Not even 2.7% of his subjects managed to succeed. This just showed how difficult the project was. It was no wonder why the higher-ups were getting impatient. At the rate he was going, they'd never see results. At least not within a short period of time. Yes. Used to being cut off, the assistant patiently explained. A lot of the subjects either turned insane or died. The only ones that we could count on are these 47 subjects. Even then, they are only showing similar signs as 876. We can't guarantee that they will turn out like him. I see. Joseph muttered. Though the numbers were low, He had somewhat expected this. Especially since all humans were different. Not all could withstand the potency of the serum. Fortunately, I have 876 with me. Recalling the successes he had with 876, Joseph calmed down a bit. Using him as a reference, he should be able to create even more soldiers. The more soldiers he created, the greater the impression he would leave on the higher-ups. This of course also meant a greater budget for future endeavors. Thinking thus far, Joseph once again laughed. Things were starting to brighten up for him.